Today on Physically Spiritual, I'm honored to talk to Anthony DeStefano about his new book, 30 Days to Your New Life, a guide to transforming yourself from head to soul. Welcome to Physically Spiritual. I've been amazed by how much growing physically healthier has changed my spiritual life. I'm captivated by discovering the truth about my body and how it reveals God. Physically Spiritual is my attempt to harmonize and share what I've discovered. I'm your host, Andrew Reinhart. Like I said, I'm joined today by Anthony DeStefano. He's an American author, television host, and activist. He's written 5 best-selling Christian books for adults, including A Travel Guide to Heaven and 10 Prayers God Always Says Yes To. And he has also written 8 best-selling books for children, including The Donkey That No One Could Ride and Little Star. And he had a recent book come out, a beautiful book, kind of in honor of his goddaughter, Greenlee. So we'll talk about that some too at the show. But welcome to the show, Anthony.
Well, thank you very much for having me. That bio is a little bit outdated. I have 18 books for children now. So there's been a lot of children's books that have come out in the last few years. I can't seem to stop them.
Well, they're beautiful. So I have a 2-year-old son, and we're expecting our second here in a couple months. And all of our friends are in kind of the baby having mode. So we have a lot of young families in our life. And, as I saw all the books you've written, I was like, he wrote that one too. He wrote that one too. And they're all on our shelf and my friend's shelf. So they're a blessing to all of us as we're starting our young families and trying to give the faith to them. So thank you for all that.
No, thank you. That's the best compliment I could ever get. It totally validates my whole life. So thank you.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I wanted to start. I was curious. And for me, I know it's been true, and for everyone I talk to, that the mission the Lord calls us to grows out of our story, out of the way the Lord led our life. And I was just curious, this book is, it's been described, what was it, the description? It's kind of like has some self-help elements, but it also has the faith element. It's, a bit of the Catechism and St. Thomas Aquinas, and it's a bit of, like a drill sergeant or a coach, kind of guiding your life. And I'm just curious, how has this book grown out of your life?
And by the way, I love the way it's described as Tony Robbins meets Thomas Aquinas. That's a tremendous compliment. I hope the book is just a fraction of how good that implies. I think the book has grown out of me in a couple of different ways. The first thing, Andrew, is I'm a writer. I've been a published author now for 20 years. My first book was in 2003, A Travel Guide to Heaven. But I was a writer long before then. I always was writing my friends' book reports. And after that, I was always, trying to get newspaper articles published. I'm a writer. I write. And the best thing about being a writer, and ask other writers and they'll tell you this, the best thing about being a writer isn't seeing your name in print. It's the fact that everything that happens to you in life, the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, all the suffering, all the joys, all the tedious, irritating experiences, all the traffic jams, everything can be used for your writing. And knowing that I had it in me to be a writer, knowing that God gave me this gift to be a writer, I think God himself gave me the whole gambit of human emotions and experiences from a very early age. I've had some very, very high highs. I've had some very, very low lows. Lots of people have died on me. I've loved and lost lots of people. I've had lots of financial problems. I've had lots of financial successes, lots of achievements, and lots of dismal kinds of failures. I'm carnal and passionate Italian by nature. I grew up in New York City with all the stresses that are inherent in living in the city. At the same time, I've lived in rural areas as well. I've taken a lot of self-help programs and personal development programs. At the same time, I've worked a lot with the church with the Vatican in Rome for many, many years. The point is that I've lived a lot. I've had a lot of experiences, and I think that the most natural thing for a writer to want to do, especially a Christian writer, is to want to use those experiences to take any suffering, any joy, and that I've had in my life, and try to use it to help other people. Because while everyone suffers, not everybody is a writer. Not everybody is a Christian writer. I've also written a lot of books, as you mentioned before, and some of those nonfiction books have been on some pretty deep subjects. A
Yeah.
Travel Guide to Heaven. I wrote a book called Hell, a Guide. I wrote a book called 10 Prayers God Always Says Yes To. I wrote a book on atheism. I had to do a lot of research for these books, and these books are, in order to take these profoundly um, difficult, complex subjects and make them easy to understand and popularize them without watering down the orthodoxy. It takes a lot of research and a lot of thought. So between all the living I've done and between all the research I've done, I've just got a lot of stuff up here, and I just felt the need over the last few years to put it into a form that could help other people who have having the same kind of problems. And the last thing I'll say about this is I just was telling my wife the other day how blessed I feel to have written a book like this. Imagine if you or any of your listeners could just take all the experiences they've had in their life and be able to hand it to somebody, their kid, their nephew, their niece, or just a stranger, and say, here, this is the sum total of all the important things that I've learned in life. It's a great blessing. It makes me very happy. And that's, I think, where this book comes from.
As I've had the blessing of reading the book over the last few weeks, I couldn't help but just kind of be amazed at the breadth of topics that are covered in these 30 days. So the format of the book is each day you kind of give an explanation. It's lighthearted, it's friendly, but it's also sometimes kind of some tough love,
Yes.
a lot of good information. And then every day there's a challenge and they kind of build. And,
that's right.
And the topics, some of it's like the basic belief in God, conversion, setting goals, the church, a morning offering, the catechism, confession, the mass, gratitude. I mean, you basically ran the whole gambit from basics of just how to be a functioning human to belief in God to a lot of kind of the meat and potatoes of Catholicism. So it really was amazing seeing the breadth of topics that you brought to bear in this one book.
Thank you. I wanted it to be, to give a whole program, to give a program for a person's whole life. It doesn't cover every single topic, but it covers the basics.
Yeah.
It covers the most important things. And most importantly, I think it teaches you how to get back on the horse when you experience setbacks. Because any book, any good speech for that matter, can inspire you, but it's usually something that's very short-lived. You read an inspiring book, you see an inspiring speech on or television show, or you listen to an inspiring sermon, and it helps you for a couple of days or even a couple of weeks. But then what happens? Life hits you with a 2x4, and all that stuff comes crumbling down. And so I wanted to write a book that gave people the tools to show them what to do when that happens, when life hits you with a 2x4, when you fall into sin again, when you start falling into bad old habits. So yes, I've given a whole program, but at the same time, I've taken a Vince Lombardi approach here, and I know some of your viewers will know who that is. He's the greatest football coach of all time. And he stuck to basics. But he made sure that his players knew those basics so well that even though the opposing team knew that they were going to stick to those basics, they had no way of preventing their team from scoring. And I wanted that for this book too. I wanted to give everybody the full gambit, but at the same time stick to the basics.
Yeah, and I love how it built too, because you're not just introducing them to the ideas, you're also helping them build habits. And
yes.
The book ends where you kind of pull it all together and you kind of give a rule of life or a design for life with a prayer. And it was a really good send-off. When I was reading this, I for 12 years had the blessing of doing work in RCIA in the church, and people joining the church and becoming Catholic. And one of the things I struggled with was, that you have them in class and you get to teach them a lot of ideas, but you don't get to live with them. Part of the blessings of growing up Catholic is you get to grow up with Catholic people who teach you how to be Catholic. But these people who were joining the church didn't have that opportunity. And I thought this would be a really good book to hand to somebody who was fresh into the church, because it gives them the lifestyle. It gives them the basics of how to live the faith from the top to the bottom, not in a disintegrated way, but in a very integrated and holistic way.
Well, thank you very much. That's exactly what I was trying to do. So you're making my head big by telling me that I achieved it, but I appreciate it. The book grows mainly out of the fact that so many people out there are struggling with unhappiness and misery and loneliness. They just seem to be lost. There's a lot of suffering out there. You know that. And that's
Mhm.
why I've always been a big advocate of the personal development industry, people like Tony Robbins. I'm for anybody who can help alleviate suffering. Uh, but there's a serious limitation with those self-help programs. I've taken a lot of them myself, and it's what we just talked about. They work for a while, but the results are temporary. And the reason is because they focus too much on self-help and not enough on God's help. That's
Yeah.
the big trap of the self-help industry. You can use your personal development skills and become the most successful person in the world, and you can still end up being miserable. Just look at all those Hollywood movie stars. They're rich and they're famous. They've achieved all their glittering goals, and then they wind up spinning out of control with drugs and kill themselves. If you have your priorities screwed up, you're never going to be happy, no matter how much success you experience. Interestingly, though, Andrew, it works in the other direction too. There are people out there that are overly spiritual,
Hmm.
Catholic people too, and this is one of the reasons I love your show, because you're about incorporating the whole human body
Hmm.
and mind and spirit. But some of these people who are overly spiritual, they think that all they have to do to overcome their problems is say one prayer to God, and God is going to wave a magic wand and all their problems are just going to vanish into thin air. That's not the way it works. They don't realize the truth of that old saying that God helps those who help themselves.
Hmm.
Uh, the personal development movement has discovered some very important tools to help us deal with problems and the stresses of life: goal setting, the power of momentum, power of managing your emotional states and staying positive. My book tries to take the best of both of these worlds and combine them. I wanted a book to write a book that utilized the very best self-help principles, but balanced and corrected them with orthodox, traditional Christian Catholic principles. And so that my hope is that the results people get will not just be temporary, but will be long-lasting and even permanent.
Yeah, I'm curious about this mix of Tony Robbins and Thomas Aquinas. Throughout the book, there was a distinctive voice that kept coming through, and it had that kind of challenging edge to it, that not afraid to say the difficult stuff, but it didn't take it over the top. There was also the love of a father in there, a real concern. There was a part to it that where there was a tempering at times, where the I would say a love came through for the audience too. And I'm just curious, uh, is that your voice? Is that something that's kind of developed as you've been working on this material, or is this a voice of somebody that you knew maybe growing up?
Well, I wish I could say it was another voice. I I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to be a drill sergeant, as you had mentioned to me earlier. But unfortunately, that's me. It's my real voice. In previous books I've written, like the first book I mentioned, The Travel Guide to Heaven,
Mm-hmm.
the subject matter of that book demanded that I have a different kind of a voice. Heaven is the happiest subject in the world. And when I wrote that book, I wanted it to be a happy book. I wanted every
Mm-hmm.
page to be happy, So my tone was a bit playful and cheerful throughout the book. Even when I was taking shots in that book at atheists, I didn't let them have it with both barrels. I was playful about it because I wanted the book to be lighthearted and happy. But that goes against the grain. I'm not normally that way. I am a New York Italian. I grew up with a bunch of loud, tough talking people, Irish, Italian, Jews in Brooklyn, New York. So I do have it in me to be a drill sergeant. But fortunately for me, I knew from the beginning that this is exactly the kind of tone and voice that are perfect for a book like this. Look, if you want to
Mm-hmm.
change somebody's life radically, if you want them to stop the nonsense and stop making excuses and stop wasting time and get off their butts and start doing things right for a change, if you want them to do that, which is a radical change, then you better be sure of yourself. People want certitude. They're attracted by certitude. They want to listen to someone who's sure of what they're talking about, especially if it involves something big like changing your life. The Bible says that if the bugler sounds an uncertain call, who will arise for battle? The answer is nobody. Now, as far as the lighthearted elements, thank you for saying that about the love, because I think that's that's a very important thing. This is not supposed to be a funny book. I try to insert some lighthearted moments, and I think this is a principle I have in life, and it works in business too, for people who own businesses or manage other people. You can be as tough as you want with people. You can be as firm and tough talking as you like, as long as you show those people that you're not doing that out of some sense of sadism, that you're being tough because you have their best interests at heart, because you're trying to help them, and that because on some level you even love them. I think and I think by showing some humor once in a while, that you can convince people of that. But that's the whole point of this book. I think that if you do that, that's when you get the best results from people, because people want certitude, but they want love. They want tough love, especially if things are going bad in their life. So it comes down to getting results. I remember somebody asked Tony Robbins one time if he had gotten a master's degree, and he said, no, but I got a master's in results. That's what I want for this book. I want people to read it and get results from it. Don't necessarily want them to like me. I just want them to respect me enough to get results and change their lives.
Yeah, I definitely got that. So we're here in the Midwest in Northwest Ohio, and we're very much in the over apologize kind of culture around here, so that East Coast voice definitely had some power. There were some chapters that gave me a kick in the butt. It just made me, there was an energy that I felt in the challenges at the end of each part. So that definitely came through. And the other piece that I appreciate about it is that confidence piece that you were talking about, because it's hard to figure out what to do and what not to do. You could pull up 3 different self-help experts and they'll tell you the exact opposite thing. Just look at the diet wars. One guy will tell you, don't eat any vegetables. The next guy will tell you, don't eat any meat. And the next person will tell you, well, they're both wrong. Don't eat any polyunsaturated fat or something like that. Right. So there's all of these really confident so-called experts out there saying different things. But the beautiful thing about our faith is, right, we have revelation, which is a different kind of knowing things. Right. So what we receive in the church and the deposit of the faith really gives us a foundation as Catholics in a truth that the rest of the society doesn't have. So I thought that was a great anchor in the book, that then as you pulled in these different self-help elements and health elements, it had that grounding, that confidence. And that was really powerful.
I think so. And as I said before, that's what's missing from self-help books. These self-help gurus, they're good people. They want to help people, but they're so afraid to mention God because they think they're going to be branded as religious fanatics. They don't want to be branded. They want to reach as many people as possible. They know that we're living in a secular, materialistic world, and so they don't go close to God. And meanwhile, how the heck are you going to achieve happiness in this world without being grounded in God and in the truth? And Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. I mean, he's the way and the truth, my goodness, and the life. So how can you have a self-help book, a personal development book, that doesn't include the way, the truth, and the life? So yes, that's one of the reasons why I'm sure that this book is going to do well, because it's grounded in the truth of our faith, which we can put our confidence in because it is true. And it's also on a personal basis. It's taken from all of the suffering that I've experienced in my life. There's nothing in this book that I haven't learned the hard way. I wish somebody had handed me this book when I was 15 or something like that. They didn't. I had to learn everything through reading and through the school of hard knocks. So I am 100% sure of every single principle in this book. It's the very opposite of what you said is going on in the whole health world, where do you do high carbs, high protein, nobody knows what they're talking about, and everybody has a different study to back up whatever it is they're saying. It's just the school of confusion. So no, this is based on solid experience and the truth of the Gospels and our faith.
Yeah, the other words of our Lord that seem to apply for me is the truth will set you free, right? He's the way, the truth, and the life, but it's also a truth that has effect, right? It's not just an idea out there. And so much of the self-help world is, it's like, learn more and try harder, learn more and try harder, learn more and try harder. And for me, as I hear that, I just think Pelagianism and Gnosticism, you're saved by your effort, and then you're saved by learning new information. It's these ancient heresies that seem to crop up again and again and again.
That's right. For the modern world, the search is the most important thing. And to have an open mind is the most important thing. That's the highest value. But I have news for these people. The only purpose for having an open mind is so that it can close upon the truth.
Yeah.
Having an open mind doesn't mean you should have an amorphous, cloudy mind. You've got to close your mind on the truth. Otherwise, it's just a search in exercise in futility.
Yeah. As we're talking, I want to jump into a couple specific chapters, if that's
Sure.
all right. So you devoted a whole chapter of this book to fasting.
Yes.
And I love fasting because it's both something that's deeply rooted in our tradition and almost every other faith, but it's also something that is really kind of coming to the forefront of a lot of contemporary science as something that's being backed up in people's experience. So I'm curious, like, from your perspective, why is it so important for Catholics to fast?
Sure. Well, yes, fasting is all the rage today, as you said, and there are undeniable health benefits of fasting. And, one of the reasons why we know that it's true and why it's not a case of just people with different, ideological ways of viewing it, is that nobody makes any money when people fast. Think about it. The pharmaceutical industry doesn't make any money on it. The alternative medical industry doesn't make any money. Nobody makes any money when you stop eating and drinking. So the fact that fasting is so popular all around the world for so many centuries, despite its relative inability to generate income, tells you that there must be something to it from a health point of view. But to pull the camera back, though, and to bring it more to why Catholics and Christians need to fast. Fasting, as we know, is defined as abstaining from food or drink for a certain period of time. But fasting can have a much broader meaning. You can fast from any activity. You could fast from going on social media or watching TV or listening to music or shopping or gossiping. Any of those acts of self-denial can be very beneficial in developing your willpower. It's all about your willpower. But what you have to understand is that so many of the problems that people experience today are a result of their weakened wills. Over the years, our wills have lost much of their innate power. The world and all its glittering attractions have been working hard to erode our will, through advertising, through Hollywood, through the music industry, through all the tempting things they're always showing us. But when you fast, you say no to the world. You say no to instant gratification. You say no to your whole psychology. You completely interrupt your usual self-indulgent way of interacting with the world. And that radical pattern interrupt is what can have a transformational effect on your life. When you say no to something like eating, it does something to your body by purifying it. It does something to your will by strengthening it. It does something to your brain by teaching it that you do have the power, you do have self-control. And it does something to your soul by acting as a form of penance for bad behavior and as a form of preparation for better behavior in the future. I mean, fasting, helps your soul in so many different ways. You could write a whole book on this one subject alone. It produces humility. It demonstrates sorrow for sins. It helps you discern God's will by purifying you. It clears clears a pathway to following God's will by detaching you from all the distracting things of the world. It can help make you more sympathetic to the poor and the sick, to people who are forced to do without the necessities of life. And most importantly, I think fasting is a powerful form of prayer. Just look through the Bible and you'll see how essential fasting has been as a means of preparing all of God's people, whether it's Moses, Elijah, Daniel, Esther, St. Paul, the apostles, and of course, our Lord himself. And Jesus said, as you remember, certain demons can only be overcome by prayer and fasting. And if Christ said it, you can be sure it's true.
Yeah, as we're talking, the more I'm seeing the connection between the truth and freedom, and what bridges the gap is like the intellect and the will, right? We know the truth, and the truth will set us free. And one of the images you use in the book for the church is that the Catholic Church gives us a map of life. And when I heard that, I couldn't help but think of like some of the insights of Jordan Peterson. He talks about maps of meaning,
Yes.
And how we need these maps to navigate the world, and it's within the context of these that we have freedom, that we can do what helps us to flourish. Versus the secular idea is, any idea that comes in from the outside is sort of this imposition that limits our freedom, right? So how contrary it is that the world sees the church as an imposition on human freedom that enslaves us, when in fact the truth that the church gives us is what sets us free. So I was curious, like, what did you mean by the idea of a map of life that the church gives?
Sure. Well, the first thing I want to say, though, is that the distinction you make about the church and the world is so spot on. That's the whole meaning of the book of Genesis, in the Garden of Eden. God sets man and woman in the Garden of Eden and says, you could eat of any tree except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What is he saying there? He's saying you have a lot of freedom. You have plenty of freedom, but there are limits to that freedom. Freedom is not the same as freedom is not doing anything you like. That's not freedom. That's license. And there's a big difference between freedom and license. And the big mistake that Adam and Eve made was eating of that tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And what that actually means is that it has nothing to do with knowing the difference between right and wrong. It's that they made themselves the arbiters of what was right and what was wrong. They decided what was right and what was wrong. And that's something that only God can do. So that's just an insight into the story in Genesis. But getting back to the map analogy, yes, the church is the map of life. It's one of the reasons why Christ founded the church, to give us a map of the Bible, a map of theology, a map of morality, a map of Christianity, a map of our personal relationship with the Lord, a map of how to be fruitful in the kingdom of God. In fact, as I say in the book, not only is the church a map, but it's the best kind of map because it's a treasure map. Only on this map, the buried treasure isn't marked with an X, it's marked with a big cross. And the treasure and the destination that you get to by using this map is peace and happiness in this world and heaven in the next. Now, as I said in the book, if you want to print out of this map, all you have to do is go get yourself a catechism. A catechism, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, is a summary of the principles of the Catholic religion, laid out in a very systematic way. Now, this is one of the big differences between Catholics and Protestants. It distinguishes us from our Protestant brothers and sisters. They think that the Bible is the map of Christianity, but it's not. The Bible is the Word of God. It's the greatest book and most important book in the world. It has the power to bestow life-changing grace on anybody who reads it. It tells the story of redemption and creation, redemption and salvation. You need to be reading the Bible every single day of your life. But the Bible is not a map. The Bible is not even one book. It's a whole library of books written at different times and in different literary styles for different people. Some of the books of the Bible are historical, some are allegorical, some are philosophical, some are prophetic, some are poetic. All the books of the Bible are inspired by God, but the Bible is not a simple, clear map for Christian living. It can't possibly serve that function because there's just too many ways that you can interpret it. You can interpret the Bible 50,000 different ways, and that's why there are 50,000 different Protestant denominations and about 1 million Protestant popes. That's the greatest blessing that we have as Catholics, that we only have one pope, that we don't have 1 million popes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Anthony, thank you so much. Thank you for writing this book. Thank you for coming on the show. So down in the show notes, there's a link to get your copy of the book from Sophia Institute Press. The book comes out the same day that this podcast releases on June 20th. So make sure to check out the show notes. I'll also link Anthony's website there and also the Catechism of the Catholic Church if you want to get that map of life. But Anthony, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Great interview. Great to be here with you.
Thanks. God bless. Thank you so much for listening to or watching Physically Spiritual. I'm so grateful for every moment you've given to this show. Please remember to subscribe, like, follow, and share the show. And if you want to support everything we're doing at Physically Spiritual or at Awaken Catholic, you can become a patron of the show at physicallyspiritual.com. To find anything I'm up to, head over to becominggift.com. God bless everyone.